Take your babies and get out. My husband's mother screamed those words into the freezing Chicago air, her diamond necklaces catching the porch light. My husband stood 3 feet away, his hands casually tucked into his cashmere pockets, watching me bleed through my surgical bandages while holding our 10-day-old twins in the middle of a blizzard. They thought I was a broken, unemployed, desperate woman who would freeze on the streets tonight. They thought I would be crawling back tomorrow, begging for scraps. They had no idea that while they were popping champagne to celebrate getting rid of me, I was making a phone call that would completely destroy their multi-million-dollar real estate empire. My name is Allison. I am 34 years old, and until that freezing night, I thought I knew the man I married. Before I share exactly how I dismantled their perfect lives, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to smile through the pain while plotting the ultimate payback. Growing up in a working-class neighborhood, I learned early on that security was something you built yourself. That was why I poured my soul into becoming a cybersecurity consultant. When I met David, a vice president at his family's commercial real estate firm, he seemed like the perfect balance of ambition and charm. But marrying David meant marrying his mother, Beverly, a woman who ruled their Chicago real estate empire with an iron fist and viewed me as nothing more than a gold-digging outsider who lacked the pedigree her son deserved. The day my twins Leo and Lily were born via an emergency surgery should have been the happiest day of my life. Instead, it marked the beginning of a calculated nightmare. I had taken a leave of absence from my tech firm just before the delivery. Beverly and David assumed I had been fired. They saw me as a financial burden, a sudden liability that no longer fit their flawless social narrative. 10 days after the surgery, the truth of their cruelty finally broke the surface. It was a Tuesday evening. A massive winter storm had triggered a blizzard warning across Lake Forest, Illinois. The temperature had plummeted to -15 degrees. I was in the nursery feeding Lily when I heard heavy footsteps approaching. The nursery door swung open and Beverly stood there, her face contorted with absolute disgust. David lingered in the hallway behind her, refusing to meet my eyes. Beverly did not mince words. She told me to pack a single bag. She said the house was legally hers, the rules were hers, and my presence was no longer required or tolerated. When I asked David what she was talking about, he looked at the wall and said, I had lied to him about my job, that I was a liability he could not afford to support, and that his lawyer would be sending divorce papers in the morning. I begged them to be reasonable. I reminded them of the blizzard raging outside our windows. I reminded them that the babies were only 10 days old, and my incision was still fresh and actively bleeding. Beverly simply laughed. She said the babies were my problem now, the consequences of my own deception. She grabbed my coat from the hallway closet and threw it at me. She demanded my house keys. David finally spoke, warning me that if I did not leave quietly, he would call the police and tell them I was having a severe mental breakdown. He said he would take the children from me permanently once I was declared homeless and unfit. I looked at the man I had loved, realizing he had orchestrated this entire moment. I was clearing the house tonight. He was making room for someone else, and he was using my supposed unemployment as the perfect excuse to discard me. The heavy mahogany front door was flung wide open. The brutal blast of wind felt like crushed glass against my skin. I stood on the porch in my thin wool coat, clutching Leo and Lily tight against my chest. My surgical incision throbbed violently, and I could feel a warm trickle of fresh blood seeping through my bandages, staining my shirt. Beverly, there is a blizzard warning, I said, my voice steady, despite the agonizing pain in my abdomen. The roads are covered in black ice. You are putting your own grandchildren in danger. They are not my grandchildren, Beverly spat, stepping back into the warmth of the foyer. They are the mistakes my son made with a penniless nobody. Get out before I call the police for trespassing. I shifted my gaze to David. David, are you really doing this? I asked. My mother is right, Allison, David said, his voice completely devoid of emotion. You hid the fact that your company let you go. I cannot have a financially unstable dependent dragging me down. Sign the divorce papers tomorrow, and maybe I will give you a few $100 for a motel. Now leave. We have a guest arriving. David stepped forward and shoved me backward onto the icy stone of the porch. The heavy door slammed shut. The deadbolt clicked loudly, sealing my fate in the freezing night. I stood alone in the howling wind as the snow piled up around my boots. Lily let out a soft wind. I adjusted my coat, wrapping it securely around the twins, to block the freezing air, and began to walk down the long, sweeping driveway. I did not cry. I did not panic. David and Beverly thought I was spending my maternity leave clipping coupons and panicking over a lost paycheck. What they did not know was that I had not been fired. I had voluntarily stepped down because 3 weeks ago I had quietly sold a proprietary security software I had coded myself to a Silicon Valley tech conglomerate. The payout was $18 million in cash. I reached the end of the driveway, pulled my phone from my coat pocket, and opened a secured application. I bypassed David's contact completely and pressed a single button to summon my private driver. I was not a helpless victim. I was a millionaire with nothing left to lose, and my revenge was going to be absolute. 2 minutes later, the blinding headlights of a custom black Cadillac Escalade cut through the punishing blizzard. The heavy vehicle glided smoothly over the black ice, its massive tires gripping the frozen pavement with ease, before coming to a perfect halt right in front of me. The driver, a former military contractor named Gideon, whom I had retained on a private payroll 6 months ago, stepped out into the freezing snow. He wore a crisp, dark suit, completely unfazed by the sub-zero wind chill. He opened the heated rear door and bowed his head slightly. "Good evening, boss. The penthouse is ready," Gideon said, taking my small overnight bag and gently helping me guide the babies into the cabin. "Thank you, Gideon," I replied, stepping into the immaculate heated leather interior. I settled Leo and Lily into the pre-installed top-of-the-line car seats I had ordered weeks in advance. The warmth of the SUV slowly began to thaw the numbness in my fingers, but the ice in my chest remained solid. "Where to, ma'am?" Gideon asked from the driver's seat, adjusting the rearview mirror. "Downtown," I said, looking out the tinted window at the sprawling mansion I was leaving behind. "Let them think I am freezing to death tonight. The game begins tomorrow." The Escalade cruised through the Chicago storm, leaving Lake Forest behind. My twins slept peacefully, unaware of the monstrous family they had escaped. My phone buzzed, shattering the quiet hum of the engine. A text from David. "If you do not drop the kids off at my mother's office by noon tomorrow, I am calling child services and reporting you for child endangerment. You have no money, Allison. Do not be stupid." I stared at the glowing screen. He was already building his paper trail, trying to establish a narrative of a concerned father dealing with an unstable, destitute mother. He wanted to force me into a corner where signing away my maternal rights was my only option for survival. He thought he held all the cards because he controlled our joint checking account. I did not reply. I took a screenshot and uploaded it to a secure, encrypted cloud server I had built myself. Every threat, every text, every insult was ammunition. I opened my banking app, bypassing the joint accounts David had surely drained by now, and logged into my private offshore portfolio. The $18 million sat there safely shielded behind layers of corporate shell companies. I had earned every single penny of that money through years of relentless coding, building impenetrable firewalls, and negotiating with cutthroat tech executives. I knew how to defend against ruthless attacks. David was about to learn that my skills extended far beyond a computer screen. I leaned back into the plush leather seat and closed my eyes, letting the rhythmic motion of the luxury vehicle soothe my aching body. I knew the battles ahead would test my endurance, but I was fully prepared to fight. 40 minutes later, the SUV pulled into the private underground parking garage of a glittering glass high-rise in the heart of downtown Chicago. This building housed some of the most elite real estate in the city, the kind of place Beverly could only dream of owning. The lobby alone boasted imported Italian marble and a 24-hour concierge service reserved exclusively for billionaires and industry titans. Gideon escorted me to the private elevator, bypassing the main reception desk entirely. He scanned a biometric keycard, and the doors silently closed, shooting us up to the 65th floor. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse foyer. It was a sprawling 4,500-square-foot masterpiece with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the frozen expanse of Lake Michigan. I had purchased it entirely in cash, under a blind limited liability company, 3 days before the twins were born. David and Beverly thought I was spending my maternity leave clipping coupons and folding baby clothes. In reality, I had been wiring millions to offshore corporate accounts and buying prime real estate. The nursery has been fully stocked per your instructions. Ma'am, Gideon said, placing my bags near the expansive marble kitchen island. And the security perimeter is active. No one comes up this elevator without your biometric approval. Perfect, I said, unzipping my coat and carrying the sleeping twins toward the hallway. Get some rest, Gideon. We have a lot of work to do this week. I laid Leo and Lily in their matching cribs, watching their tiny chests rise and fall in the soft ambient light. They were safe. They were warm. And they would never ever be subjected to the toxic superiority of Beverly's household again. I walked into the master bathroom, stripping off my blood-stained shirt. I carefully cleaned and rebandaged my surgical scar. The physical pain was sharp, but it was nothing compared to the cold, calculated rage coursing through my veins. I put on a fresh silk robe, walked into my new home office, and opened my encrypted laptop. If David wanted a war, he was going to get a nuclear winter. I immediately logged into our joint bank accounts, just to confirm his predictable behavior. Unsurprisingly, David had already drained the $12,000 we had in shared savings. He had also canceled the primary credit card in my name. He was executing a classic financial abuse playbook. Cut off resources, isolate the victim, force compliance. I wanted me to wake up tomorrow morning, starving, terrified, and willing to agree to absolutely anything just to secure a roof over my children's heads. He fully expected me to crawl back to his mother's estate, apologizing for my supposed incompetence, begging for a second chance to be their obedient, silent punching bag. Instead, I initiated a wire transfer of $200,000 into a fresh checking account to pay my legal retainer immediately. My private smartphone vibrated. An encrypted call from Jamal began ringing. I hesitated for a fraction of a second before answering. In my line of work, anonymous or encrypted calls were never a coincidence. Hello, I answered, my voice guarded and cold. Allison, it is Jamal, a deep, hushed voice replied. Jamal, my sister-in-law, Lauren's husband, an African-American forensic accountant who worked directly under Beverly at her commercial real estate firm. Jamal was brilliant, fiercely observant, and the only person in that toxic family who had ever treated me with an ounce of genuine respect. We had bonded over being the outsiders marrying into a family of raging narcissists. Jamal, are you calling from a burner line? I asked, noting the encryption signature flashing across my screen. Yes, listen to me very carefully. Jamal said, his voice barely above a whisper, accompanied by the faint sound of a bathroom exhaust fan running in the background. Lauren is asleep, but I had to warn you. David and Beverly were popping champagne in the living room an hour ago. They are planning a complete legal slaughter. I figured as much, I said, pulling up a blank notepad on my laptop screen. What is the play? Beverly has already retained Richard Cole, the most ruthless family court lawyer in Illinois. They are drafting an emergency ex parte motion right now. They are going to claim you had a postpartum psychotic break, that you stole the twins, and that you are living on the streets. They want full physical and legal custody by Friday morning. I felt my jaw tighten. They were not just trying to divorce me. They were trying to erase me from my children's lives entirely. And the guest David mentioned, I asked. The one they were clearing the house for. Jamal sighed. Her name is Vanessa. She is the 25-year-old daughter of Thomas Thorne, Beverly's biggest private investor. David has been sleeping with her for 6 months. Beverly orchestrated the whole thing to secure Thomas Thorne and his capital for her failing business. The final piece of the puzzle. It was not just cruel, it was purely transactional. Jamal, I said, my voice dropping an octave. You said Beverly's business is failing. You are her lead forensic accountant. How bad is it? It is a house of cards, Allison. It is very bad. I need you to send me the internal ledgers, I demanded. Allison, if I do that, I am crossing a massive legal line. I could lose my CPA license. Jamal hesitated. If you do not do it, 2 innocent, 10-day-old babies are going to be handed over to a sociopath and a thief, I replied coldly. I am going to crush them, Jamal. I am going to tear their empire down to the studs. You can either go down with the sinking ship, or you can help me light the match. Choose. A long silence hung on the encrypted line. Then Jamal exhaled a sharp breath. Check your secure mail in 10 minutes. I am sending you the shadow ledgers. The line went dead. I set my phone down on the marble desk, a slow smile spreading across my face. The war room was officially open. I spent the next hour configuring a secure server environment on my laptop to receive Jamal's files without leaving a digital footprint. As the decryption software ran in the background, I walked through the penthouse to check on the twins. The city of Chicago glowed beyond the expansive glass windows, a glittering grid of amber and white lights contrasting with the freezing lake. Leo and Lily were sound asleep in the climate-controlled nursery, wrapped in soft, organic cotton swaddles. I gently brushed my fingers against Lily's tiny cheek. Nobody was taking them away from me. I returned to my office just as my phone screen lit up with another notification. David was escalating his intimidation tactics. Read this carefully. My lawyer is filing the emergency custody motion at 8 in the morning. If you do not bring the kids back to my mother's house by 7, I am sending the police to every cheap motel in the city. You are sick, Allison. You need psychiatric help. Do not make me destroy you in court. I read the words twice, analyzing the pathetic psychological game he was trying to play. He was attempting to build a narrative of my supposed mental instability, projecting his own malicious actions onto me. He truly believed I was huddled in some freezing damp motel room, terrified of his legal threats. He expected me to cave under the pressure to surrender my children to beg for a fraction of his mercy. Instead, I opened my contacts and dialed the personal cell phone number of Diane Hayes. Diane was not just any attorney. She was the most feared high-profile litigator in Chicago, known for dismantling arrogant billionaires in family court. She charged $2,000 an hour and only took cases that guaranteed total annihilation of the opposing party. I had worked with her firm 2 years ago on a cybersecurity audit, and we had maintained a strong professional relationship ever since. Diane answered on the second ring despite the late hour. Allison, she said, her voice sharp and alert. To what do I owe the pleasure at this hour? Diane, I need your services immediately, I said, leaning back in my ergonomic leather chair. My husband and his mother just threw me out into a blizzard with my newborn twins. They are filing an ex parte emergency custody motion tomorrow morning, claiming I am homeless and suffering from a psychotic break. I heard the rustle of papers on her end of the line. Where are you right now? Safe in a $4 million penthouse I bought in cash last week, I replied smoothly. I also just sold my proprietary software for $18 million, and my husband thinks I am unemployed and destitute. Diane let out a low whistle. I could practically hear the gears turning in her brilliant predatory mind. That is the kind of leverage I love, Diane said, her tone shifting to razor-sharp focus. If Richard Cole files an ex parte motion, he expects you to lack resources. Judges often rubber stamp emergency orders if the mother is a no-show and the father claims mental instability. We are going to blindside them. I want them destroyed, Diane, I stated plainly. I want David and Beverly to leave the courtroom with absolutely nothing. Send text messages, bank statements, showing the drained accounts and the penthouse deed proving secure housing, Diane instructed. I will have my associates draft a counter-motion. We will intercept Cole at the courthouse steps. I immediately began compiling the digital dossier. My fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up portals. An unread email from our health insurance provider caught my eye. The subject line read, "Important information regarding your coverage cancellation." I clicked open the message, my eyes scanning the corporate jargon. Effective immediately, the health insurance plan covering Allison, Leo, and Lily had been terminated. The sheer cruelty washed over me. David had not just thrown me into a blizzard. He had actively canceled the health insurance of his 10-day-old premature twins and his wife, who was still bleeding from major abdominal surgery. If my surgical incision became infected tonight, we would have been turned away or burdened with catastrophic medical debt. He knew exactly what he was doing. He wanted to weaponize my physical vulnerability. I felt my heart rate spike, a primal maternal fury igniting deep within my chest. I opened my digital wallet to check the backup credit cards I kept for household emergencies. Declined, frozen, cancelled. Every line of credit linked to David or Beverly had been shut down. They were constructing a financial cage, assuming I was shivering in a bus station, unable to buy formula. I compartmentalized the rage. I funneled every ounce of anger into cold, calculated legal preparation. I took high-resolution screenshots of the insurance cancellation and frozen credit card portals. I logged every timestamp, creating a clear, undeniable timeline of financial abuse and reckless endangerment. I forwarded the entire package to Diane via a secure encrypted tunnel. "This is not just a custody battle anymore," I typed in the attached message. "This is attempted endangerment of minors. He canceled our health insurance at midnight during a blizzard. Build the narrative. Show the judge exactly who the real monster is." While Diane worked through the night, I secured my own perimeter. I routed $2 million through a series of shell companies based in Delaware, effectively washing the money before depositing it into a fresh operational account. This account would fund my war chest anonymously. David and Beverly would not find a single trace of my wealth until I shoved it down their throats. I walked back into the nursery to check the twins. They were sleeping soundly, their breathing steady and rhythmic. I adjusted the organic cotton blankets, feeling a fierce protective instinct solidify my resolve. They would never know the sting of Beverly's conditional love. They would never learn to seek approval from a father who viewed them as mere pawns in a pathetic power play. I was going to carve out a magnificent, peaceful life for them, built on a foundation of absolute security. Returning to my office, I began drafting a comprehensive timeline of Beverly's emotional abuse and David's spineless complicity over the past 3 years. I detailed the passive-aggressive remarks, the deliberate exclusion from family financial planning, and the constant belittling of my career. I attached previous emails where Beverly had explicitly demanded David manage my income. I pulled security footage from our old house accessed remotely through a back door I had installed months ago, capturing the exact moment David shoved me onto the icy porch. The video was damning. It showed the blizzard howling my precarious grip on the newborn twins and David's callous smirk as he locked the deadbolt. No judge in their right mind could view that footage and grant him custody. He had handed me the murder weapon for his own character assassination. By 4 in the morning, my legal fortress was impenetrable. I had compiled an airtight dossier that proved secure housing, immense financial stability, and documented physical and financial abuse from the opposing party. Diane sent a confirmation message at 4:30. Countermotion finalized. "We are not just defending your custody. We are filing for immediate exclusive legal and physical custody, requesting supervised visitation only for David, and filing a restraining order against Beverly. Get some sleep, Allison." The execution begins at 8. I closed the laptop, the screen going dark. I did not feel tired. I felt electrified. The adrenaline of the impending ambush fueled me. I poured a glass of cold water, standing by the massive window overlooking the sleeping city. The blizzard was finally breaking, the heavy snow giving way to a clear, brutal chill. Tomorrow the sun would rise over a different Chicago. David thought he was a master manipulator playing a high-stakes game of chess. He believed he had cornered a helpless pawn. He failed to realize that the board did not belong to him. I owned the board, the pieces, and the very ground he was standing on. My phone vibrated on the desk, illuminating the dark room. Another encrypted message arrived, this time an automated alert from the decryption software I had left running. The shadow ledgers from Beverly's commercial real estate firm had successfully bypassed the security protocols. The raw data was ready for analysis. I took a deep breath, setting my water glass down on the marble counter. The legal defense was fully prepared and ready to deploy at dawn. Now it was time to forge the sword I would use to decapitate their financial empire once and for all. My secure application chimed with an incoming audio request. The caller ID displayed the same scrambled alphanumeric string from earlier tonight. I accepted the connection and slipped on my noise-canceling headset. "Are you in, Jamal?" I asked, my fingers hovering over the newly decrypted master folder. "I am in," Jamal replied. His voice sounded tight, echoing slightly against the glass confines of his vehicle. I told Lauren I needed to run to the all-night pharmacy for cough medicine. I am parked 3 blocks away in the freezing cold. Tell me the software cracked the encryption. I am looking at the root directory right now. I confirmed opening the primary spreadsheet. You did not exaggerate. There are thousands of hidden transactions here. Walk me through the battlefield. Where do I find the kill shot? Open the subfolder labeled Alpha Capital Expenditures. Jamal instructed the rapid clicking of his own laptop keys, audible over the connection. Scroll down to the offshore vendor payments. Beverly thinks she is a real estate mastermind, but she operates like a sloppy mob boss. I navigated to the specified directory. Rows upon rows of wire transfers flooded my screen, all directed to a single holding company based in the Cayman Islands. Look at the dates, Jamal said, his tone razor sharp. Notice a pattern. I cross-referenced the timestamps. The transfers aligned perfectly with the dates David claimed he was traveling for investor conferences. Every single month, a wire for exactly $50,000 leaves the primary corporate operating account. Keep digging, Jamal urged. Look at the authorized signatory for those wires. I opened the attached PDF authorizations. The digital signatures belonged to David. He had been quietly siphoning capital straight out of the corporate reserves. But that was only a fraction of the problem. As a forensic accountant, Jamal possessed the unique ability to see the rotting foundation beneath a glittering skyscraper. Now open the commercial mortgage-backed securities file, Jamal commanded. Beverly owns 6 major office buildings in the downtown loop. The occupancy rates have plummeted since the shift to remote work, but her public investor reports show 90% occupancy. How is she faking it? I scanned the lease agreements. She is creating ghost tenants. I realized the sheer audacity of the fraud, making my eyes widen. She formed dummy corporations, signed fake commercial leases, and used the offshore embezzled funds to pay her own company rent. She is artificially inflating her net operating income to keep the banks from calling in the commercial loans. Exactly, Jamal said, letting out a harsh breath. She used that inflated income to secure a massive bridge loan from Thomas Thorne last year. That is why David is sleeping with Thomas Thorne's daughter. If Thomas looks closely at the books, he will realize he funded a sinking ship. David is stringing the daughter along to keep Thomas complacent. But here is the real tragedy, Allison. Look at who Beverly listed as the primary compliance officer on the loan documents submitted to the federal regulators. I opened the compliance disclosures. My blood ran cold. She listed you, Jamal, I stated. Yes, Jamal said, his voice dropping heavy with suppressed fury. They made me the designated fall guy. I am an African-American man from the South Side who married into a wealthy, bigoted family. Beverly never missed an opportunity to remind me of my place. She smiles at country club dinners, but behind closed doors, she treats me like a diversity hire who should be grateful for her charity. When the IRS and the federal prosecutors inevitably tear this house of cards down, who do you think they are going to blame? The wealthy connected matriarch, or the black accountant who officially signed the audits? They set you up to take the fall for federal wire fraud, I whispered, feeling a profound surge of respect for the man on the other end of the line. You are facing 20 years in federal prison if this collapses organically. Which is why I am helping you burn it down first, Jamal replied fiercely. I refuse to let them destroy my life. I refuse to go to prison while David marries a billionaire heiress and Beverly sips martinis in Lake Forest. But I need protection, Allison. If I hand you the weapon to destroy them, Beverly will retaliate. She has deep pockets and a lot of political favors to call in. I leaned back in my leather chair, staring out at the frozen Chicago skyline. Jamal did not know the full extent of my resources yet. He only knew I was smart enough to fight back. It was time to solidify our alliance with absolute transparency. Jamal, I said, my voice projecting unwavering authority. You do not need to worry about Beverly's deep pockets anymore. 3 weeks ago, I sold my cybersecurity software architecture to a tech conglomerate. I have $18 million sitting in clean, untraceable corporate accounts. I just purchased a $4 million penthouse in cash. David threw me out tonight because he thinks I am a penniless, unemployed dependent. He thinks I am shivering in the snow with my babies. A sharp intake of breath echoed through the headset. You have $18 million in liquid capital, Jamal asked, stunned. I confirmed, and I am going to use a significant portion of it to protect you. I will hire the best white-collar defense attorney in the country to grant you federal immunity in exchange for blowing the whistle on Beverly's fraud. I will fully fund a new accounting firm for you once the dust settles. You will never have to answer to that woman again. I heard Jamal let out a shaky exhale, the sound of a man who had been carrying the weight of the world finally finding a release valve. We have a deal, Allison, Jamal said firmly. So what is the strategic move? How do we execute the kill? I pulled up the corporate debt structure Jamal had sent. I noticed something crucial. Beverly's primary commercial loans were held by a mid-sized regional bank, and those loans were severely distressed. Beverly's bridge loan with Thomas Thorne is just a band-aid, I analyzed aloud. Her primary mortgages are underwater. The bank is getting nervous. What happens if an anonymous private equity firm steps in and offers to buy Beverly's distressed commercial debt from the bank at a slight premium? Jamal gasped, the realization hitting him instantly. The bank would sell the debt to offload their risk. The anonymous firm would become Beverly's primary creditor. They would hold the absolute power to call in the loans, demand immediate repayment, and seize all her assets. I am going to buy her debt, Jamal. I stated, a cold smile touching my lips. I am going to become her master. By the time I am finished, I will legally own the very house she threw me out of tonight. You are going to completely obliterate them, Jamal said, awe bleeding into his voice. I am going to make them wish they had frozen in the blizzard instead of me, I promised. Get back to Lauren, Jamal. Keep your head down. I will handle the financial acquisitions by morning. I terminated the connection and immediately began drafting the acquisition proposals to the regional bank. The trap was set. The bait was in motion. David and Beverly thought tomorrow would bring my surrender. Instead, tomorrow would unleash a financial apocalypse they could never outrun. The digital clock on my secondary monitor flashed 5:30 in the morning. I had barely finished initiating the targeted debt acquisition protocols when an encrypted file package arrived from Jamal. The subject line read, "Custody Strategy." I opened the zip file, scanning the contents. Jamal had warned me they were drafting a motion, but seeing the legal documents Beverly and David prepared made my blood run cold. This was not a standard emergency custody petition. It was a meticulously fabricated character assassination designed to strip me of my fundamental human rights. Beverly had not just hired Richard Cole, the most vicious family attorney in the city. She had engaged a private high society concierge psychiatrist who was currently on her corporate payroll. I opened a PDF stamped with the doctor's letterhead. It was a signed sworn affidavit claiming I had been exhibiting severe escalating symptoms of postpartum psychosis. The fraudulent document detailed entirely fabricated incidents where I supposedly threatened to harm Leo and Lily. The doctor claimed my alleged termination from the cybersecurity firm had triggered a violent mental break. I stared at the signature at the bottom of the page. They were not just trying to take my babies. They were laying the legal groundwork to have me involuntarily committed to a psychiatric facility. If a judge saw this sworn medical affidavit alongside David's claim that I had fled into a blizzard, I would be detained. The police would strip the twins from my arms and lock me in a psychiatric ward, while David was granted permanent, unchallengeable sole custody. It was a masterclass in psychological warfare. They wanted me drugged, locked away, and completely erased from society, so David could comfortably move his billionaire heiress girlfriend into my home. My phone vibrated again. Jamal was back on the secure line, driving to the corporate office early to avoid suspicion. I just sent the medical affidavit, Jamal said, his voice tense over the Bluetooth connection. I found it hidden on Beverly's home network server. I bypassed her firewall using a physical flash drive while I was at the house for dinner last night. Allison, they are aiming for total destruction. They want you institutionalized by noon today. I forwarded the fraudulent medical evaluation directly to Diane. My lawyer replied within 30 seconds. Her response was chillingly enthusiastic. "This is medical fraud and perjury," Diane typed. "The doctor just handed us his medical license on a silver platter. I am drafting a motion for severe sanctions and preparing to subpoena his financial records to prove Beverly paid him for a fake diagnosis. We will destroy him in court before lunch." I spoke into my headset, my voice devoid of fear. "I have the files, Jamal. Diane is already weaponizing them. You risked everything to pull these documents from Beverly's private server. Why did you really do it? A heavy silence settled over the encrypted line. Lauren and I have been trying to have a baby for 3 years, Jamal said softly, the pain evident in his voice. We just found out we are finally pregnant. When I watched Beverly plot to tear your newborns away from you, to lock you in a hospital, just to protect her failing business and secure Thomas Thorne's capital, it made me sick to my stomach. I looked at Lauren and realized Beverly would do the exact same thing to us if we ever crossed her. She views children as leverage. I will not raise my child in the shadow of that monster. The alliance was no longer just a transaction. It was a blood pact forged in the shared desire to protect our children from a manipulative tyrant. Jamal, I said firmly, log into your personal offshore account. I just authorized a wire transfer. You will see a deposit of $500,000 hit your ledger in 10 minutes. That is your non-refundable retainer. I promise to protect you, and I do not make empty promises. Use that money to secure the best federal whistleblower attorney in the city today. I heard Jamal suck in a breath. The reality of my financial power was finally sinking in for him. I will not let you down, Allison, he vowed. I am heading into the office now. I will keep monitoring Beverly's internal communications. They think they are walking into a slaughterhouse today. They have no idea they are the ones on the chopping block. I terminated the call and cracked my knuckles. The sun was beginning to rise over Lake Michigan, casting a brilliant, blinding light across the frozen water. I walked into my expansive walk-in closet and pulled out a tailored charcoal gray suit. I bypassed the casual maternity wear David expected me to be wearing. I slipped into black leather pumps, embracing the sharp pain in my abdomen as fuel. I applied my makeup with sharp, defining lines, masking any trace of the physical exhaustion that accompanied recovering from major surgery. I looked exactly like the apex predator Beverly had never realized she invited into her home. At 7 in the morning, right on schedule, my phone lit up with a barrage of texts from David. The 60-minute countdown had begun. He demanded to know exactly which motel I was hiding in. He threatened to report a kidnapping. He warned me private investigators were scouring the city shelters. He told me that my resistance was entirely futile because I lacked the financial capacity to fight back. I ignored every single message. I picked up my briefcase, kissed the twins on their foreheads while my private neonatal nurse watched over them, and headed for the private elevator. Vance was waiting for me in the lobby, holding the door to the Escalade open. The blizzard had passed, leaving behind a crisp, bitterly cold morning. "We are heading to the courthouse, Vance," I commanded, sliding into the leather seat. "Drive fast. It is time to execute the trap and watch them burn." Vance navigated the heavy SUV through the morning traffic, the tires gripping the cleared asphalt. We were not heading directly to the courthouse just yet. The digital files Jamal had sent earlier were enough to establish Beverly and David's immediate financial fraud, but corporate sabotage required physical, irrefutable proof. Digital trails could be challenged in court by expensive defense attorneys claiming the data was intercepted or manipulated. I needed the original raw server backups. I needed the physical hard drives. My phone vibrated with a secure location pin. Jamal had diverted from his commute to Beverly's office. He was waiting in the subterranean parking garage of an abandoned commercial complex just off the interstate. I showed the coordinates to Vance, who gave a single nod and smoothly changed lanes. The garage was dimly lit, the concrete pillars casting long, ominous shadows. Jamal's modest sedan was parked in the far corner, its headlights extinguished. As the Escalade pulled up alongside it, Jamal stepped out into the freezing air. He wore a heavy wool overcoat, his breath pluming in the frigid garage. He looked exhausted, the weight of his actions clearly pressing down on his shoulders, but his jaw was set with absolute determination. I rolled down the tinted window just enough to speak. Jamal reached into his coat pocket and produced a sealed, heavy-duty metallic case. He handed it through the narrow gap. "These are the physical master drives," Jamal said, his voice echoing slightly against the concrete walls. "I pulled them directly from the main server rack at 3 in the morning before anyone arrived for the shift. They contain the original, unedited ledgers, the fraudulent lease agreements, and the offshore wire transfer confirmations with David's exact digital fingerprints. There is no denying this evidence. It is raw, uncompressed, and entirely damning. I took the heavy case, feeling the absolute power contained within its metal shell. You did perfectly, Jamal, I assured him. Your federal whistleblower attorney is already retained and waiting for my signal. Go to work. Act completely normal. Let Beverly and David believe they are winning today. Jamal offered a tight, resolved nod. Burn their empire to the ground, Allison. He turned, got back into his sedan, and drove away, disappearing into the morning light. I secured the case in the armored compartment beneath my seat. Vance steered us back onto the main road, heading straight for the towering skyscraper that housed the most feared legal institution in Chicago. Diane Hayes did not just practice family law. She orchestrated legal annihilations. Her firm occupied the entire top floor of the building, a fortress of mahogany glass and absolute confidentiality. Vance parked in the VIP underground bay. I took the private elevator directly to Diane's suite. The receptionist did not ask for my name. She simply stood, opened the heavy double doors, and gestured for me to enter the main conference room. Diane sat at the head of a massive obsidian table surrounded by stacks of legal briefs and glowing monitors. She was a striking woman in her late 50s, wearing a sharp tailored suit, her piercing eyes scanning a document with lethal precision. When I walked in, she did not offer a warm, comforting smile. She offered the fierce, calculated grin of a predator who had just cornered her prey. You look entirely too composed for a woman who was supposedly wandering the frozen streets, Diane noted, gesturing to the chair beside her. I see you brought the physical drives. I set the metallic case on the table. The shadow ledgers are inside, I confirmed. Everything we need to prove David is an active embezzler, and Beverly is orchestrating massive commercial real estate fraud. Diane signaled to her lead paralegal, who immediately took the case to a secure workstation to begin processing the physical chain of custody. Diane turned her full attention back to me, sliding a thick folder across the smooth surface of the table. Richard Cole filed the ex parte emergency custody motion exactly 10 minutes ago. Diane stated, her voice brisk and professional. They submitted the fraudulent psychiatric affidavit claiming you are a severe danger to the twins. They requested immediate police intervention to locate and detain you. The judge is reviewing it in chambers at 8:30. We are going to walk into that courtroom at 8:25. I opened the folder, reading through David's fabricated claims. The sheer audacity of his lies would have broken me yesterday. Today they only fueled my focus. We are filing the counter motion simultaneously, Diane explained, tapping a polished fingernail against the documents. We are presenting the security footage of David physically shoving you into a blizzard. We are submitting the time-stamped proof that he canceled the health insurance of his premature infants at midnight. And we are introducing the financial documents showing he drained the joint accounts to intentionally inflict financial ruin. We are not just proving you are a fit mother. We are proving he is a sociopathic abuser who weaponized the legal system. What about the psychiatric affidavit, I asked, tracing the signature of Beverly's corrupt doctor. Diane laughed, a sharp, dangerous sound. I have already drafted a motion for immediate sanctions against the physician. My associates are filing a formal complaint with the state medical board as we speak. By tomorrow, that doctor will be fighting to keep his medical license out of a shredder. He will fold instantly and testify that Beverly paid him for a fabricated diagnosis just to save his own skin. I looked at the flawless legal trap Diane had constructed. Every possible escape route for David and Beverly had been systematically boarded up and locked. They were walking into a courtroom expecting to find a defenseless, shivering victim. They had no idea they were walking into a perfectly executed ambush. Are you ready to end this? Diane asked, closing the folder and standing up. I stood smoothing the lapels of my charcoal suit. I was ready the moment he locked that door, I replied coldly. Diane grabbed her briefcase. Let us go introduce your husband to the consequences of his actions. We walked out of the conference room, the click of our heels echoing against the marble floors, heading straight for the courthouse to deliver absolute ruin. The drive took 10 minutes, but an entire digital character assassination was unfolding. My secure smartphone vibrated with a frantic rhythm. It was not David this time. A flood of notifications and emergency alerts poured in from colleagues and distant relatives. I opened my social media and the sheer scale of Beverly's manipulation washed over the screen. She had not just filed a quiet legal motion, she had launched a fully weaponized public relations campaign. Pinned to her high society profile was a staged video. Beverly sat in her living room wearing a modest cream sweater that made her look vulnerable. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she clutched a baby blanket to her chest. It was pure performative grief. "Please, if anyone has seen my daughter-in-law, Allison, contact the authorities immediately." Beverly pleaded to the camera, her voice breaking with manufactured terror. She suffered a severe postpartum mental break last night. She became violent, completely unhinged, and fled our home in a deadly blizzard. She took my precious newborn grandchildren, Leo and Lily. They are only 10 days old. They are out there in the freezing cold, and Allison is not in her right mind. We are begging for your help to bring our heirs home safely. Beneath the video, a lengthy caption detailed my supposed descent into madness. Beverly claimed I had been fired from my job months ago but hid it from the family due to my fragile mental state. She wrote that David had been trying to get me psychiatric help for weeks, painting her son as a devoted, exhausted husband trying to hold his fracturing family together. She even tagged local news outlets, the Chicago Police Department, and various missing children organizations. I scrolled through the comment section. It was a digital firing squad. Hundreds of comments poured in from fellow country club members, real estate developers, and socialites. They offered prayers for David. They expressed disgust at my actions. They called me a danger to society, a kidnapper, an unfit mother who deserved to be locked in an asylum. "Look at this," I said, handing the phone across the plush leather seat to Diane. "She is crowdsourcing a witch hunt." Diane adjusted her designer reading glasses and scanned the screen. Her lips curled into a razor-sharp smile. "This is magnificent," Diane declared, handing the device back to me. "Beverly is arrogant. She thinks public opinion dictates legal outcomes. What she just did is broadcast a verifiable malicious lie to the entire state of Illinois. This constitutes per se defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and public harassment. She is digging her own grave and live-streaming the entire process." My phone buzzed again with an alert from a local news application. Beverly had taken her campaign a step further. She had tipped off the press. An entertainment and local gossip blog had already picked up the story, featuring a photograph of David standing outside the Lake Forest police station, looking suitably distraught while holding a pacifier. He was playing the role of the desperate abandoned father to absolute perfection. "He thinks this public spectacle will force the judge to act quickly," Diane explained, her eyes fixed on the approaching courthouse. "He wants the court of public opinion to pressure the family court into signing that ex parte motion before you even have a chance to defend yourself. It is a bold strategy for a man who embezzled $3 million and threw his bleeding wife out into the snow." Screenshot every comment, every post, and every news link. I instructed my remote security team through a secure text channel. "We are archiving the entire digital footprint. Every person who shared this defamatory garbage is going to receive a cease and desist letter by tomorrow morning, and Beverly is going to pay for every single word." The town car pulled up to the rear of the Daily Center. True to Diane's prediction, a cluster of local news vans and freelance reporters were already camped out near the main public entrance, cameras poised and ready. Beverly had alerted them, hoping to capture footage of me being dragged into a police cruiser in handcuffs while she swooped in to rescue the twins. It was a theatrical production designed to secure Thomas Thorne's investment by proving the family was overcoming a tragic external crisis caused by a deranged outsider. We bypassed the circus entirely. Diane held elite clearance status, allowing us to glide through a private secured entrance reserved for judges and high-profile attorneys. We bypassed the metal detectors and took a private service elevator directly to the family court division. As we stepped out onto the marble floor of the courthouse, the atmosphere shifted. This was not the court of public opinion. This was a realm governed by cold, hard evidence, and I was armed to the teeth. We strode down the long corridor, the sound of our footsteps echoing with absolute authority. Up ahead, pacing outside the heavy oak doors of the judge's chambers, was Richard Cole. Beverly's ruthless attorney was reviewing a stack of papers, his posture exuding the arrogant confidence of a man who believed he was about to win an uncontested victory. David stood beside him, checking his gold watch, practically vibrating with eager anticipation. He was ready to walk into that room, shed a few fake tears, and walk out with a court order that would strip me of my children and lock me in a psychiatric ward. He looked up, expecting to see a bailiff. Instead, he saw me. I was not shivering. I was not crying. I was wearing a $5,000 tailored suit, my head held high, radiating the absolute terrifying calm of a woman who was about to destroy his entire existence. The arrogant smirk vanished from David's face, replaced instantly by a pale, breathless mask of pure terror. "Let the execution begin," Diane whispered, and we pushed open the heavy oak doors. The heavy oak doors slammed against the wall, silencing the room. Judge Harrison looked up abruptly from his polished mahogany desk. Richard Cole froze mid-sentence, his mouth hanging open in complete shock. David stumbled backward, his face draining of all color. He expected a terrified victim. He got a predator ready to feast. Diane glided past them, placing our countermotion directly onto the judge's desk. Her movements were fluid and lethal. "Your Honor," Diane stated, her voice cutting through the room, "we are here to contest this fraudulent ex parte motion. My client is not homeless nor suffering from any psychiatric distress. She resides in a $4 million property she owns outright. We file for immediate sole custody and request emergency sanctions against the physician who signed that fabricated medical affidavit." Judge Harrison adjusted his glasses, taking in my immaculate tailored suit and absolute composure. "This is highly irregular," he noted, flipping open our thick dossier. As the judge read the evidence of David's financial abuse and the footage of him shoving me into a blizzard, my encrypted tablet vibrated. I unlocked the device with my biometric scan. My remote cybersecurity team had just achieved total system penetration on the shadow ledgers Jamal provided. The final firewall had been completely shattered. A secure message flashed from my lead engineer. "The decryption is fully complete. We unraveled the entire offshore network. Check the live dashboard. We found the kill shot." I opened the secure application. The full magnitude of David's betrayal materialized in high-definition graphics. My cybersecurity team had mapped his exact digital footprints across international banking nodes. The system traced every fraudulent wire transfer back to its origin. The total was not a mere fraction of company profits. It was a staggering $3 million. My eyes scanned the categorized data. David had not just embezzled from his mother's commercial operating accounts. He had actively drained the employee pension fund. He rerouted the capital through 3 Cayman Island shell companies. Every transaction carried a digital signature authorizing the release of funds, and every signature belonged exclusively to David. The most damning evidence was the destination of the stolen money. My team cross-referenced the offshore accounts with domestic purchases over the past 6 months. The $3 million did not sit idle. It was weaponized to fund a secret extravagant lifestyle for Vanessa, his billionaire heiress mistress. I used the stolen pension funds to purchase a luxury yacht registered under Vanessa's name. He bought her a custom sports car and secured a long-term lease on a sprawling luxury condominium. He drained the retirement savings of hardworking employees to play a wealthy tycoon for a 25-year-old girl. And he did it while telling me we needed a strict budget for the twins' arrival. I looked up from my tablet, locking onto David. He was sweating profusely, whispering frantically to his lawyer as Judge Harrison watched the security video of him locking me out. David thought his biggest problem today was custody. He had no idea I held a digital confession to federal wire fraud. "Mr. Cole," Judge Harrison barked, slamming his laptop shut. "This footage clearly shows your client forcibly removing the mother of his newborn children during a declared weather emergency. He then canceled their health insurance exactly 45 minutes later. How do you intend to justify this under the guise of paternal concern?" Richard Cole swallowed hard, his arrogance evaporating. "Your Honor, my client was acting under extreme distress due to the mother's erratic behavior. The psychiatric affidavit clearly states she poses a severe danger to the infants." "That affidavit was purchased," Diane interrupted smoothly. "We have already filed a formal complaint with the medical board, and we are preparing to subpoena the doctor's bank records to prove financial collusion with Beverly. Furthermore, Your Honor, The opposing counsel claims my client lacks the financial stability to care for her children. I would like my client to address the court regarding her financial standing. Judge Harrison turned his stern gaze toward me. Go ahead, Allison. I stood tall, holding my encrypted tablet. Your Honor, I am a highly successful cybersecurity consultant. 3 weeks ago, I sold proprietary software for $18 million in cash. I am perfectly capable of providing for my children. However, the same cannot be said for my husband. David scoffed loudly, attempting to regain his footing. She is delusional, Your Honor. She does not have that kind of money. I manage our finances. She is unemployed. I ignored his pathetic outburst and walked directly to the judge's bench, placing my tablet before him. I am providing this court with newly decrypted financial records proving that David is actively embezzling funds. I stated, my voice echoing with lethal clarity. Over the past 6 months, David has siphoned exactly $3 million from his commercial real estate firm, including employee pension funds. David gasped, a strangled, panicked sound escaping his throat. He routed these stolen funds through Cayman Island shell companies. I continued, relentlessly pointing to the undeniable digital trail on the screen. He used this embezzled capital to purchase a yacht, a sports car, and luxury real estate for his current mistress. My cybersecurity team just finished decrypting the server logs provided by a corporate whistleblower. I am submitting this as evidence of David's severe financial instability, criminal behavior, and complete lack of moral character. He is not a concerned father. He is a desperate thief, trying to secure leverage before the federal authorities indict him. Judge Harrison stared at the meticulously organized financial mapping on the screen, his expression hardening into pure judicial fury. He looked up at David, whose legs had literally given out, forcing him to collapse into a wooden chair. Richard Cole stepped away from his client, raising both hands defensively. Your Honor, I had absolutely no prior knowledge of these alleged financial crimes. The courtroom fell dead silent. The trap had snapped shut. Judge Harrison struck his gavel with a resounding crack. The fraudulent ex parte motion is denied with extreme prejudice, he declared, his voice vibrating with authority. I am granting immediate sole legal and physical custody of the minor children to the mother. Mr. Cole, your client is stripped of all visitation rights pending a federal investigation. I am also issuing a comprehensive restraining order against Beverly. Neither of them is to come within 500 feet of Allison or her children. David slumped forward, a ragged sob tearing from his throat. Richard Cole was already packing his monogrammed briefcase, distancing himself from the radioactive fallout of wire fraud. We are done here, Diane whispered, snapping her folder shut. I did not look back at David. The man who threw me into a blizzard was now legally erased from my children's lives. But David was merely the symptom. Beverly was the disease. Vance was waiting at the private exit, holding the Escalade's door open. I slid into the heated interior, pivoting from family court to corporate warfare. Diane climbed in beside me. You neutralized the immediate threat, Diane noted. But Beverly will retaliate. She believes she has a real estate empire and a billionaire investor backing her. She will try to bury you in civil litigation to bleed your resources. She does not have an empire, I replied coldly. She has a graveyard of toxic debt, and I am about to buy the headstones. Back at my penthouse, the twins were sleeping peacefully under the neonatal nurse's watch. I locked myself inside my home office. My cybersecurity team had fully unpacked the shadow ledgers Jamal provided. It was time to examine the structural integrity of Beverly's commercial real estate portfolio. I initiated a secure audio link with Jamal. David is out, I told him. Sole custody granted. He is legally radioactive. I just heard the screaming from Beverly's corner office, Jamal confirmed. She is throwing glass paperweights. But Allison, she is already pivoting. She is calling Thomas Thorne, begging him to expedite the next tranche of the bridge loan to tie you up in lawsuits. We need to cut the head off the snake. Walk me through the commercial mortgage-backed securities, I instructed, pulling up the spreadsheets. Where is she bleeding? Look at the 6 primary downtown office buildings, Jamal directed. Her actual physical occupancy rate is hovering around 30%. But look at the loan covenants she signed with Illinois Regional Bank. I scanned the agreements. The bank requires her to maintain an 80% occupancy rate to avoid technical default, I noted. How is she bypassing the audits? She is manufacturing ghost tenants, Jamal explained in disgust. She created dozens of shell companies. She drafted fake commercial lease agreements for empty office space. Then she used the dwindling cash reserves from the pension fund and Thorne's initial bridge loan to pay her own company rent. She is artificially inflating her net operating income to fool the bank, I realized. She is laundering her own borrowed money. Exactly, Jamal confirmed. But the music is about to stop. Illinois Regional Bank has a $300 million commercial loan portfolio tied directly to those buildings. The balloon payments are due in exactly 14 days. She does not have the liquidity because David stole the $3 million she needed to fake this month's operating income. I stared at the screen. Beverly was drowning in toxic debt. The regional bank held the mortgages on everything she owned, including the Lake Forest mansion, where she had kicked me out into the snow. If she defaulted, the bank would initiate foreclosure proceedings. Illinois Regional Bank is an exposed mid-sized lender, I deduced. If $300 million in loans default, their stock price will plummet. They are terrified of this debt. They are desperate to offload the risk, Jamal agreed. Beverly is relying on Thomas Thorne's final cash injection to pay off the bank. If Thorne backs out, she is bankrupt by the end of the month. I leaned back in my leather chair. I did not want Beverly bankrupt by the end of the month. I wanted her decimated by the end of the week. Jamal, I said, a predatory calm washing over me. What happens if a private equity firm approaches Illinois Regional Bank today and offers to buy Beverly's entire $300 million toxic debt portfolio at a slight discount? Jamal gasped. The bank would sell it in a heartbeat. The private equity firm would immediately become Beverly's sole creditor. I am taking control of my $18 million liquid capital, I stated, opening a secure channel to my offshore wealth managers. I am leveraging my capital to secure a corporate buyout line of credit. My blind limited liability company is going to purchase every single outstanding mortgage Beverly holds. You will own her, Jamal whispered. You will hold the exclusive power to call in the loans and foreclose on her entire empire. I am not just going to foreclose on her commercial buildings, I promised. I am going to seize the Lake Forest estate. I am going to legally own the very driveway she threw me onto. I am initiating the debt acquisition protocols right now. I contacted my financial acquisition team in Delaware. I instructed them to form a specialized holding company designed to purchase distressed commercial debt. I authorized the transfer of my $18 million as collateral to secure the buyout financing. The regional bank was desperate to erase Beverly's toxic loans. They would accept the discreet cash offer without hesitation. Beverly believed her wealth made her untouchable. She believed she could treat people like disposable trash because her name was etched into skyscrapers. She was about to discover that real power did not lie in empty buildings. Real power lived in the shadows, executing moves with terrifying silent precision. The financial guillotine was raised. By noon the next day, the acquisition of Beverly's commercial debt was completely finalized. My Delaware-based limited liability company was now the sole legal owner of every mortgage tied to her failing empire. The regional bank had transferred the paper with terrifying speed, desperate to clear the toxic assets from their own balance sheets before the fiscal quarter closed. They asked no questions about the anonymous private equity firm buying the debt. They were simply relieved to escape the blast radius. I established another secure connection with Jamal to confirm our positioning. He reported that Beverly was currently pacing her corner office screaming at her junior analysts because the regional bank was refusing to return her calls regarding her loan extensions. She had no idea the bank no longer held the loans. She was panicking, but her blinding arrogance allowed her to believe Thomas Thorne's capital injection would save her business. She was so focused on keeping up appearances for her billionaire investor that she failed to realize the ground beneath her feet had already collapsed. It was time to pull David and Beverly out of their fortified mansion and into an arena I completely controlled. I needed a location that projected corporate neutrality, but was actually wired for a flawless execution. Alpha Holdings Tower was the perfect venue. It was a premium corporate center in downtown Chicago, where Diane's firm occasionally rented elite glass-walled negotiation suites for high-stakes mediations. It was a space designed to make arrogant people feel comfortable right before they were financially eviscerated. I sat at my marble kitchen island, watching the twins sleep peacefully on the high-definition baby monitor, and opened a fresh email draft. I needed to sound exactly like the broken, defeated woman they expected. I had to feed their massive, fragile egos perfectly so they would walk blindly into the slaughterhouse. I typed slowly, crafting every sentence to project absolute desperation. David, the court order has locked my accounts. I cannot sustain a legal battle against your mother. I am willing to discuss a comprehensive settlement regarding custody and financial support. I do not want to fight anymore. Meet me tomorrow at 10 in the morning at the Alpha Holdings Tower Mediation Suites. We can sign the necessary paperwork there. I sent the email directly to David, copying Richard, Cole, and Diane. Diane had already been briefed on the psychological strategy. She immediately followed up my email with a perfectly crafted message of her own to the opposing counsel. Diane stated that her client was highly distressed out of resources and seeking a rapid, amicable resolution to avoid further public embarrassment. It was a masterful performance of legal surrender. 10 minutes later, Jamal sent a priority text to my encrypted line. Beverly just received a call from David. They are literally cheering in the hallway. David told her you are completely broke and begging for a surrender. He is bragging to the entire executive floor that his aggressive strategy broke your spirit. I smiled, a cold, predatory expression, reflecting in the dark screen of my monitor. They truly believed they had won. Beverly assumed that the combination of her social media smear campaign, the frozen credit cards, and the sheer terror of facing her boundless wealth had forced me into rapid submission. David thought his aggressive legal threats had successfully intimidated me into signing away my maternal rights. He actually believed he was going to walk into that negotiation room, slide a piece of paper across the mahogany table, and walk out with full custody of Leo and Lily. He thought he was going to hand my children over to his billionaire heiress girlfriend like property. I spent the remainder of the afternoon organizing the digital execution block. I created a sequential slide deck on my encrypted tablet. The presentation was designed to dismantle their lives piece by piece. The first slide contained the security footage of the blizzard proving David threw me out. The second held the decrypted bank ledgers proving his $3 million embezzlement from the company pension fund. The third displayed the offshore routing numbers tied directly to Vanessa's luxury yacht and sports car. The final slide contained the newly minted property deeds and loan transfers, proving that I was now the absolute owner of Beverly's entire commercial portfolio. I walked into my expansive walk-in closet to select my armor for tomorrow. I bypassed the subdued conservative dresses a typical distressed mother might wear to a custody surrender. Instead, I selected a sharp, impeccably tailored $5,000 black suit. I paired it with a silk emerald blouse and black leather stiletto heels. I wanted to look like an apex predator stepping into the boardroom. I wanted them to realize their catastrophic mistake the exact second they laid eyes on me. Evening fell over Chicago, casting long, freezing shadows across Lake Michigan. I sat in the nursery, gently rocking Leo, while Lily slept soundly in her crib. The anger that had burned so fiercely in my chest on the night of the blizzard had condensed into a cold, diamond-hard focus. They had thrown us out to freeze. They had plotted to steal these beautiful, innocent children just to use them as props in a corporate transaction. They had treated human lives as disposable commodities. They were a disease and I was the cure. My phone vibrated on the desk. It was a direct message from Diane. Richard, Cole just confirmed. They will be at Alpha Holdings Tower at 10 sharp. They requested a hard copy of the custody surrender forms be ready for immediate execution. They are coming in completely blind. Print the forms, Diane, I replied over the secure channel. Let them hold the paper. Let them feel the illusion of victory right up until the second we crush them. The trap was perfectly set. The bait had been swallowed whole. David and Beverly were going to sleep soundly tonight, dreaming of their triumphant victory and their expanding empire. They were entirely unaware that tomorrow morning they were going to walk into a glass-walled room and watch every single aspect of their privileged existence burn to ashes. Alpha Holdings Tower stood as a massive monolith of steel and glass against the freezing Chicago morning. At 9:45, David and Beverly strode through the revolving doors. They moved with the synchronized arrogance of people who believed they owned the air they breathed. David wore a bespoke navy suit, a smug smile plastered across his face. Beverly was draped in designer cashmere, holding a crocodile skin handbag like a royal scepter. Richard Cole flanked them closely, carrying a pristine black leather briefcase containing the custody surrender forms they firmly believed I was desperate enough to sign. They took the private elevator to the mediation suites on the 50th floor. The room Diane had reserved was a masterpiece of corporate intimidation. A massive rectangular table, carved from a single slab of dark walnut, dominated the space. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a vertigo-inducing view of the city below. Beverly immediately took the seat at the head of the table, claiming absolute power. David sat to her right, resting his ankle on his knee. He checked his gold watch, letting out a loud theatrical sigh of inconvenience. Beverly complained about the venue to Richard Cole. She stated she wanted the proceedings finished in under 20 minutes because she had a celebratory lunch scheduled with Thomas Thorne at noon. She wanted the custody documents executed and my legal erasure complete before the first course was served. David chimed in, boasting that shutting off the credit cards had been his ultimate masterstroke. He claimed I was probably starving and shivering in some squalid motel on the outskirts of the city. He laughed, a cruel hollow sound echoing sharply off the glass walls. They reveled in their perceived victory, blind to reality. At exactly 9:58, Diane Hayes walked into the suite. She did not carry boxes of desperate pleas or settlement negotiations. She carried a single encrypted tablet. Richard Cole sat up straighter, adjusting his silk tie, expecting me to trail behind her in tears, begging for scraps of mercy. Instead, the heavy glass door swung open and I stepped across the threshold. The laughter died instantly in David's throat. The smug satisfaction slid off Beverly's face, replaced by sheer, unadulterated confusion. I was not shivering. I was not crying. I was wearing the $5,000 tailored black suit and the silk emerald blouse. My stiletto heels clicked against the polished hardwood floor with absolute rhythmic authority. I looked nothing like the broken dependent they discarded in the blizzard just days ago. I radiated the terrifying, untouchable power of a woman who held their entire future in the palm of her hand. But the true shock came from the person who walked into the room right beside me. Jamal stepped through the doorway, matching my pace perfectly. He wore a sharp-tailored charcoal gray suit, his posture completely transformed. He no longer looked like the subservient employee Beverly constantly belittled. He stood tall, projecting the undeniable confidence of a forensic accountant who knew exactly where the bodies were buried. Beverly gasped, her hand flying to her chest. She stared at Jamal as if a ghost had materialized in the boardroom. David dropped his foot, sitting bolt upright, his eyes darting frantically between me and his brother-in-law. "Jamal, what in the world are you doing here?" Beverly demanded, her voice shrill with sudden rising panic. "You are supposed to be at the corporate office running the quarterly audits for Thomas Thorne. You work for me." "I am exactly where I need to be," Beverly Jamal replied. His voice was deep calm and utterly devoid of the deference he usually showed her. "And the audits are completely finished. In fact, they are more comprehensive than they have ever been." David stood up, pointing a trembling finger at me. "What is this, Allison? What game are you playing? You emailed me saying you were out of money and ready to sign the surrender forms. Where are my children?" "Your children are safe in a $4 million penthouse guarded by private security," I stated, taking the seat directly opposite Beverly. "And I am not here to surrender anything. I am here to execute a corporate liquidation." Richard Cole slammed his hand flat on the walnut table. "This is a mediation regarding emergency custody, Diane. If your client is engaging in theatrical stunts, we will leave right now and let the judge issue a default judgment in our favor." "You are not leaving, Richard," Diane said smoothly, taking her seat beside me. "As of yesterday morning, Judge Harrison denied your fraudulent ex parte motion with extreme prejudice. He granted my client sole legal and physical custody. Your client is stripped of all visitation rights pending a major federal investigation. We are not here to discuss my client's fitness as a mother. We are here to discuss your client's imminent federal indictment." David collapsed back into his leather chair, the air rushing out of his lungs. The reality of his catastrophic legal defeat hit him like a physical blow. He looked over at Beverly, sheer terror replacing his earlier arrogance. He realized the cancelled insurance and the blizzard had all been weaponized against him. Beverly, however, refused to back down. Her blinding narcissism completely prevented her from seeing the trap closing around her. "You think you can intimidate me with a family court ruling?" Beverly sneered, leaning forward across the table, her eyes flashing with venom. "I own a commercial real estate empire. I will drown you in civil litigation. I will tie you up in appeals for the next decade until you are completely bankrupt and begging on the streets." "You do not have an empire, Beverly," I replied softly, placing my hands flat on the cool wood of the table and holding her furious gaze. "You have a mountain of toxic debt that is currently destroying your business, and you are about to find out exactly who holds the mortgage on your entire pathetic life." David stared at me, his chest heaving, as if the oxygen had suddenly been vacuumed from the room. The sheer denial radiating from his posture was almost pathetic. He could not comprehend that the helpless, dependent woman he had discarded was currently orchestrating his complete destruction. Instead of accepting the reality of the family court ruling, Diane had just presented his mind fractured. He retreated to his original delusional strategy. He reached over, snatched the pristine stack of custody surrender forms from his lawyer's open briefcase and violently shoved them across the smooth walnut table. The thick packet of papers slid to a halt right in front of me. "Sign them!" David demanded, his voice cracking with a mixture of terror and misplaced rage. "Sign away your maternal rights right now, Allison. I do not care what fake legal document Diane claims she filed. I do not care what lies you are spinning about my mother's business. You are unstable. You are unemployed. My mother has enough capital to bury you in civil litigation until you cannot afford to feed yourself, let alone 2 infants. Sign the papers, hand over Leo and Lily, and I will tell the police to call off the search." I did not even look at the documents. I looked directly into David's panicked eyes. "You are bargaining with a currency you no longer possess, David," I replied smoothly. "You think you are standing on a fortress, but you are standing on a trapdoor, and my hand is hovering right over the lever." Richard Cole finally found his voice, reaching out to pull the documents back. "David, sit down and be quiet," the lawyer hissed urgently. "If Diane Hayes says Judge Harrison denied the motion and issued a restraining order, she is not bluffing. We need to leave this room immediately and reassess our legal strategy. We are entirely exposed." "We are not leaving until she signs those forms," Beverly snapped, slamming her manicured hand on the armrest of her leather chair. "This is a pathetic intimidation tactic. She dragged Jamal here to make us think she has insider information. It is a bluff. She is a desperate woman trying to extort us. I will not be held hostage in a mediation suite by a girl who used to clip coupons in my kitchen." Beverly grabbed her crocodile skin handbag and pushed her chair back, fully intending to storm out of the suite and drag her son with her. She expected the heavy glass doors to swing open at her command. She expected the world to part for her just as it always had. I calmly reached forward and tapped a specific sequence on the sleek digital control panel embedded in the center of the conference table. A heavy metallic thud echoed through the suite. The electronic deadbolts on the reinforced glass doors engaged simultaneously, locking us inside. A second later, the automated smart blinds descended rapidly over the floor-to-ceiling windows, blocking out the morning sun and the vertigo-inducing view of the Chicago skyline. The sudden darkness swallowed the room, leaving only the soft amber glow of the table interface illuminating our faces. "What are you doing?" Beverly demanded, her voice spiking with genuine fear as she pulled on the locked door handle. "Open this door immediately. This is unlawful imprisonment. I will have you arrested." "You are not imprisoned, Beverly," I stated, my voice echoing coldly in the darkened room. "You are simply a captive audience. You demanded a swift resolution before your celebratory lunch with Thomas Thorne. I am honoring your request. We are going to resolve everything right here, right now." I tapped another button on the control panel. Above us, the ceiling panels hummed as a high-definition laser projector descended silently into the room. A massive motorized screen unrolled against the far wall, dropping down like a digital execution block. The projector flared to life, casting a brilliant, blinding white rectangle across the darkened space. Richard Cole scrambled to his feet, pulling his phone from his pocket. "I am calling building security. This mediation is officially terminated. Jamal stepped forward, intercepting the lawyer's path without laying a finger on him. His presence alone was an immovable wall. "Put the phone away," Richard Jamal advised, his tone deadly and calm. "If you call security, they will call the police. And if the police arrive, the financial documents we are about to display on that screen will be handed directly to the federal authorities before lunch. Sit down and protect your own law license. You do not want to be an accessory to what happens next." Richard Cole hesitated, his eyes darting from Jamal to the glowing projector screen, and then finally to the locked door. The sheer confidence radiating from our side of the table overrode his legal bravado. He slowly lowered his phone and sank back into his chair, physically distancing himself from David and Beverly. He recognized a sinking ship, and he was already securing his lifeboat. David remained standing, his fists clenched at his sides. He looked like a cornered animal, realizing the trap had completely closed. "You cannot do this, Allison," he stammered, his bravado entirely replaced by desperation. "You have no right to hijack this meeting. You forfeited your rights the moment you shoved a bleeding woman and your 10-day-old infants into a blizzard," I replied, my voice slicing through the dark room like a razor. "You thought you could operate in the shadows, David. You thought you could hide your actions behind your mother's wealth and a purchased medical affidavit. You thought wrong. I am dragging every single one of your secrets into the light." I turned to Jamal and gave him a single definitive nod. Jamal opened his encrypted laptop, his fingers flying across the illuminated keyboard with the speed and precision of a master forensic accountant. He bypassed the local network, connecting his machine directly to the ceiling projector via a secure wireless bridge. "For 3 years, I sat at your dinner table and let you belittle me," Beverly Jamal said, not looking up from his screen. "You called me family, but you treated me like an expendable asset. You thought I was too quiet, too grateful for my job to ever look closely at your books. You thought you could use me as the compliant scapegoat for your massive commercial fraud." Beverly's face turned a sickly shade of gray. She stopped pulling at the locked door and slowly turned to face the glowing screen. The arrogant matriarch who had walked into the room 10 minutes ago was completely gone. In her place stood a terrified woman staring down the barrel of her own destruction. "I did not just look at your books," Beverly Jamal continued, his voice ringing with absolute, unshakable authority. "I mapped every single transaction. I tracked every offshore wire. I unraveled every ghost tenant and every fraudulent commercial lease agreement you submitted to Illinois Regional Bank. And then I handed the entire decrypted ledger to your daughter-in-law." Jamal hit the enter key. The projector screen flashed black for a fraction of a second before illuminating the room with a massive high-definition spreadsheet. The trap was fully primed. There was no escape. The projector screen glowed with rows of meticulously organized financial data. Jamal enlarged the center column, bringing massive offshore wire transfers into sharp focus. The staggering numbers were highlighted in vivid crimson red, reflecting perfectly in the glass walls. I watched Beverly lean forward, her eyes narrowing in disbelief as she tried to comprehend the raw data illuminated before her. She was a seasoned corporate tycoon, and it only took a few painful seconds for her to recognize her own internal operating account numbers. "What is this fabricated nonsense?" Beverly demanded loudly. Her gaze flickered toward Jamal. "You generated fake ledgers to extort us." "I did not generate anything," Jamal replied, stepping away from the laptop. "These are direct pulls from your encrypted master server. Look at the authorization column, Beverly. Look at the digital signatures required to release capital." Beverly squinted at the screen. Beside every single crimson transaction was a cryptographic approval stamp. The initials matched perfectly. "David. Over the past 6 months, Jamal stated your son systematically drained $3 million from your corporate reserves. He bypassed internal safety protocols and siphoned capital directly from the employee pension fund. He routed the money through 3 shell companies in the Cayman Islands to wash the digital trail." David shot up from his chair. The heavy leather seat tipped backward and crashed onto the hardwood floor. "That is a lie," David shouted, his face slick with terrified sweat. "He is a disgruntled employee trying to frame me. Mother, do not listen to this garbage. They hacked the system." Diane Hayes let out a sharp, mocking laugh. You cannot hack a dual authentication biometric ledger, David. Those transfers required your thumbprint and your personal passcode. You authorized every single penny. Beverly slowly turned her head to look at her son. The color completely vanished from her face. She was ruthless, but not stupid. She knew her company was bleeding capital-blaming remote work trends. It never occurred to her that the parasite draining her empire was sitting across the dinner table. David, Beverly whispered, her voice trembling with a terrifying suppressed rage. Tell me right now this is a manipulation. Tell me you did not touch the pension fund. If federal regulators find out the pension is missing, we are looking at 20 years in a federal penitentiary. I did not touch it, David stammered, holding his hands up defensively. It is an accounting error. Jamal made a mistake. You know how incompetent he is. I did not make an error, Jamal fired back, and neither did Allison. Allison, show her the destination accounts. I tapped the control panel. The spreadsheet vanished, replaced instantly by a series of high-resolution photographs and legal contracts. The first image was a stunning 60-foot luxury yacht moored at a private dock. The second was a custom sports car gleaming in a showroom. The third was a signed lease agreement for a sprawling $10,000 a month penthouse in downtown Chicago. You did not just steal $3 million, David, I said, making sure every syllable hit him like a physical strike. You stole it to fund an extravagant lifestyle for your 25-year-old mistress. Richard Cole stared at the screen, utterly speechless. He looked at the lease agreement illuminated on the wall, then leaned forward, his eyes widening as he read the name on the signature line. Beverly followed the lawyer's gaze. She read the name aloud, the syllables catching in her throat like broken glass. Vanessa Thorne. David flinched as if he had been struck by lightning. He backed away from his mother, hitting the glass wall of the suite. You bought a yacht for Thomas Thorne's daughter. Beverly gasped, her breathing turning shallow and erratic. You stole $3 million from my company to play sugar daddy for the daughter of my primary investor. I let the reality sink in. Beverly had orchestrated the divorce, shoved me into a blizzard, and tried to steal my twins just to secure Thomas Thorne's capital. She had no idea David was actually robbing her blind to pay for Vanessa's affection. I used your money to impress her, Beverly, I stated coldly. He knew Thomas Thorne would never let his daughter marry a man making a standard salary. David decided to accelerate his inheritance. He robbed your employees blind to buy yachts and sports cars while telling me we needed a strict grocery budget. David was shaking violently now. Mother, I can fix it, he pleaded, holding his hands out toward Beverly. I was going to put the money back as soon as Thomas signed the final bridge loan. It was an investment. I had to look the part. Vanessa expects a certain standard of living. Beverly let out a guttural, horrifying scream. She lunged across the space separating them and slapped David across the face with devastating force. The crack of her hand against his cheek echoed like a gunshot in the suite. You absolute fool! Beverly shrieked, her carefully maintained high society facade crumbling into pure venomous panic. Thomas Thorne is a ruthless venture capitalist. If he finds out you used stolen pension funds to buy his daughter a boat, he will pull his investment. He will hand us both over to the federal authorities personally. You destroyed everything I built. David pressed a trembling hand to his reddened cheek, tears of sheer panic welling in his wide eyes. He looked at Richard Cole for help, but his lawyer had completely withdrawn, sitting perfectly still with his hands folded on the table. Richard Cole was a highly paid defense attorney, not a miracle worker. He knew a sinking ship when he saw one, and he was not going down with a client who had just confessed to federal wire fraud in front of 5 witnesses. The mother and son empire was shattering from the very inside out, and I sat perfectly still watching them tear each other to pieces. She looked up at me, the last shred of her arrogance completely eradicated. Her eyes were wide, taking in the official documents that proved her absolute ruin. She was not just looking at a stack of paper. She was looking at the executioner of her entire legacy. You bought my debt. Beverly whispered the words, scraping against her throat. Her hands trembled so violently, the heavy manila folder rattled against the walnut table. I did not just buy it, Beverly. I corrected, my voice cold and precise. I own it, outright. My limited liability company is now your sole creditor. I hold the paper on all 6 of your commercial properties in the downtown loop. But more importantly, I hold the mortgage on the Lake Forest estate. David let out a choked, desperate sound. He tried to stand, but his legs failed him again, forcing him to grip the edge of the table to keep from collapsing onto the floor. You bought our house, he gasped, his eyes darting between me and his mother. You threw me out of my own home into a blizzard. David, I reminded him, making sure every syllable hit with maximum impact. You told me I had no rights. You told me I was a penniless dependent. So I decided to buy the rights to the very ground you walk on. I turned my attention back to Beverly. She was hyperventilating now, clutching her chest as the sheer magnitude of her predicament crashed down upon her. She had built her entire identity on being untouchable, on leveraging her wealth to crush anyone who dared defy her. Now she was entirely at my mercy. Your commercial loans were already in technical default. Beverly, I continued relentlessly. You violated the occupancy covenants months ago by creating those fraudulent ghost tenants. That means I have the absolute legal right to accelerate the loans immediately. I am calling in the entire $300 million portfolio. You cannot do this! Beverly shrieked, slamming her hands against the table in a desperate, futile display of power. Thomas Thorne is wiring the bridge loan on Friday. We will pay off the debt. You cannot accelerate. Thomas Thorne is not wiring you a single cent. Jamal interjected smoothly from his position beside me. His voice was calm, projecting the authority of a forensic accountant who had already secured his immunity. Because Thomas Thorne received a comprehensive encrypted dossier at 8 o'clock this morning. Beverly's face contorted in sheer horror. You sent it to Thomas, she breathed, her voice cracking. I sent him everything, Jamal confirmed. I sent him the shadow ledgers proving you artificially inflated your net operating income. I sent him the documents proving David embezzled $3 million from the employee pension fund. And I sent him the photographs of the luxury yacht his daughter is currently sailing on, funded entirely by stolen pension money. David let out a loud, pathetic whimper, burying his face in his hands. He knew exactly what this meant. He had not just stolen money. He had humiliated a ruthless billionaire venture capitalist. Thomas Thorne called me 45 minutes ago, Jamal added, delivering the final crushing blow. He is not just pulling the bridge loan, Beverly. He is initiating a massive civil lawsuit against your firm for investor fraud. And he told me to tell David that if he ever comes near Vanessa again, he will personally ensure David never sees the outside of a federal penitentiary. Beverly slowly slumped back into her heavy leather chair. The fight completely drained out of her. Her commercial empire was gone. Her investor was gone. Her son was a confessed embezzler facing federal prison. And the woman she had despised, the woman she had literally thrown out into the snow to die, was now her master. Richard Cole quietly zipped his briefcase shut. He did not say a single word. He simply stood up and walked toward the locked glass doors, waiting to be released from the slaughterhouse. He was officially withdrawing as their counsel. I placed my hands flat on the table, leaning forward to deliver my ultimatum. This is how this ends, I stated, my voice ringing with absolute terrifying clarity. David, you are going to sign a full, irrevocable surrender of your parental rights right now. You will have absolutely no legal, physical, or financial connection to Leo and Lily ever again. You will sign away every single claim to my assets, my companies, and my future. I cannot do that. David pleaded, his face stained with tears of panic. They are my children, Allison. You cannot just erase me. You erased yourself the second you canceled their health insurance during a blizzard, I countered ruthlessly. You are a sociopathic thief, David. If you do not sign those papers right now, I will hand Jamal's decrypted ledger directly to the FBI. They will arrest you for federal wire fraud, embezzlement, and pension theft. You will serve 20 years in federal prison. I turned my gaze to Beverly. She was staring blankly at the mahogany table, completely shattered. And you, Beverly, I continued. You are going to sign over the deed to the Lake Forest estate immediately, in lieu of foreclosure. You and David will vacate the premises by 5 o'clock this evening. You will leave with exactly what you gave me. The clothes on your back and nothing else. Beverly looked up at me, her eyes hollow and defeated. Where are we supposed to go? She whispered, her voice stripped of all its former arrogance. We have nothing left. You can go to a cheap motel, I replied, echoing David's cruel words from the night of the blizzard. or you can freeze on the streets. I genuinely do not care. But if you try to fight me on this, if you try to delay the foreclosure or contest the property transfer, I will accelerate the commercial loans and trigger a full-scale federal investigation into your corporate fraud. I will make sure the IRS dismantles whatever is left of your pathetic life. I tapped the digital control panel on the table. The heavy electronic deadbolts disengaged with a loud click. The smart blinds slowly rolled up, flooding the room with brilliant morning sunlight and exposing the sweeping vertigo-inducing view of the Chicago skyline. Diane Hayes pulled the custody surrender forms from her pristine leather briefcase and slid them across the table toward David. She then placed the property transfer deeds directly in front of Beverly. "Sign them," I commanded, "or I make the call to the FBI right now." David did not hesitate. His hands were shaking so violently he could barely grip the heavy fountain pen Diane provided, but he signed every single page. He signed away his children, his marriage, and his future in less than 30 seconds, desperate to avoid a federal prison sentence. Beverly stared at the property deeds for a long, agonizing moment. She looked at the city skyline she had always believed she owned. Then she picked up the pen and signed away her estate. The empire was officially dead. I gathered the executed documents and handed them to Diane. The transaction was complete. I stood up, smoothing the lapels of my tailored suit, and looked down at the two broken people sitting at the table. They thought pushing a mother and her newborn infants out into a blizzard would kill her. They did not realize that some mothers were born to be the storm. I turned away from the table, my stiletto heels pivoting sharply on the hardwood floor. Diane Hayes and Jamal fell in step beside me, our synchronized movement projecting absolute, untouchable authority. We had achieved total victory. The paperwork was executed, the assets were secured, and my children were permanently safe from their toxic grasp. But before I could reach the heavy glass doors of the mediation suite, the fragile, toxic bond between mother and son completely disintegrated behind us. The sound of flesh, striking flesh, cracked through the room with the force of a gunshot. I paused, glancing over my shoulder. Beverly stood over David, her chest heaving, her eyes wild with a feral, unhinged fury. A bright, angry red handprint was already blooming across David's left cheek. He cowered in his leather chair, holding his face, staring up at the woman who had spent his entire life sheltering him from the consequences of his own incompetence. "You worthless, pathetic excuse for a man!" Beverly shrieked, her voice echoing violently against the glass walls. "I spent 30 years building a commercial real estate empire. I leveraged everything to give you a life of absolute privilege. And you destroyed it all to buy a yacht for a 25-year-old girl. You stole from my company. You stole from my employees. You handed my entire legacy over to this woman on a silver platter." David scrambled out of his chair, retreating until his back hit the polished walnut table. His initial terror was rapidly mutating into a desperate, cowardly rage. He was a narcissist, stripped of his armor, and his instinct was to immediately shift the blame. "Do not act like you are innocent in this," David yelled back, his voice cracking with hysteria. "You pushed me into this corner. You demanded I secure Thomas Thorne's capital at all costs. You told me to keep Vanessa happy so her father would sign the bridge loan. How was I supposed to maintain the illusion of extreme wealth on the standard salary you paid me? I had to look like a titan to marry into the Thorne family. I did what you trained me to do. I lied to survive. You embezzled $3 million! Beverly screamed, stepping forward and shoving him hard in the chest. "You committed federal wire fraud. You did not do that for me. You did it because you are a weak, greedy coward who could not stand the fact that your wife was actually successful while you were just a nepotism hire in my office." David let out a harsh, bitter laugh, pointing a trembling finger at his mother. "You are calling me a fraud. You created ghost tenants. You drafted fake commercial leases. You committed bank fraud for months to artificially inflate your net operating income. You are just as guilty as I am. You taught me that the rules do not apply to us as long as we have enough capital to crush whoever gets in our way. But you were wrong. Allison just crushed us." They were tearing each other to pieces, exposing the rotting core of their relationship. There was no loyalty between them, only a shared delusion of superiority that had finally shattered. I watched them with absolute clinical detachment. I did not feel an ounce of pity. They had earned every single second of this agony. Jamal turned fully around, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored charcoal suit. He looked at the screaming mother and son duo with a profound, quiet disgust. He had spent years enduring Beverly's condescension and David's arrogant microaggressions. Now he was holding the final nail for their coffins. "You are both arguing over who destroyed the company," Jamal stated, his deep voice effortlessly cutting through their hysterical screaming. "But you are failing to grasp the actual timeline of your destruction. The company was dead the moment you decided to make me the compliant scapegoat for your massive commercial fraud." Beverly whipped her head around to face Jamal, her eyes wide and bloodshot. "You have your immunity," Jamal. Beverly spat, her voice dripping with venom. "You handed Allison the shadow ledgers and you got your protection. Just take your money and get out of my sight." Jamal did not move. He offered a cold, predatory smile that mirrored my own. "You think Allison was the only person I sent those shadow ledgers to?" Jamal asked softly. The remaining color drained entirely from Beverly's face. She stopped breathing. David froze, his hand still clutching his reddened cheek. "As a licensed, certified public accountant, I have a strict legal and ethical obligation to report massive financial discrepancies," Jamal explained, savoring every single syllable. "When I discovered the extent of your bank fraud, the fake leases, and David's pension embezzlement, I did not just build a dossier for Allison. At 6 o'clock this morning, I submitted the entire decrypted, uncompressed financial package directly to the Criminal Investigation Division of the Internal Revenue Service." Beverly's knees finally gave out. She collapsed hard onto the carpeted floor of the mediation suite, her designer handbag spilling across the ground. "I also sent a duplicate package to the regional director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation," Jamal continued mercilessly. "I filed officially under the Federal Whistleblower Protection Program. The federal agents are not just going to audit you, Beverly. They are currently securing warrants to raid your corporate headquarters. By the time you get back to the office, the FBI will be confiscating your servers, freezing your remaining operational accounts, and seizing all corporate assets." David let out a high-pitched, strangled gasp. He slid down the edge of the conference table, landing on the floor beside his mother. He pulled his knees to his chest, rocking back and forth in pure, unadulterated terror. He knew the FBI did not negotiate. He knew the IRS did not accept apologies. He was going to federal prison and there was absolutely no escape. "You have exactly until 5 o'clock this evening to vacate the Lake Forest estate," I reminded them, my voice ringing with finality. "When the clock strikes 5, my private security team will enter the premises. If you are still inside my house, they will have you arrested for criminal trespassing. Do not try to take the artwork. Do not try to take the vehicles. Take your clothes and get out of my sight." I turned my back on them for the final time. I did not wait for a response. I walked through the heavy glass doors of the mediation suite, leaving them weeping on the floor, surrounded by the ashes of their fraudulent empire. Diane and Jamal followed me out the doors, clicking shut and sealing the tomb behind us. We walked toward the private elevator in comfortable silence. The oppressive weight that had rested on my shoulders for the past 3 years was completely gone. I had walked into this building carrying the trauma of a woman discarded in a blizzard. I was walking out as a conqueror who had just executed a flawless, bloodless financial assassination. The elevator doors slid open. I stepped inside, pressing the button for the lobby. The descent was smooth and rapid, reflecting the swift, brutal justice we had just delivered. I pulled out my phone and checked the secure camera feed in the nursery. Leo and Lily were awake, cooing softly as the neonatal nurse gently rocked them. They were completely insulated from the chaos. They would never remember the cold wind of that blizzard, and they would never know the toxic monsters who had tried to claim them. "Let us go home," I said to Jamal and Diane as we reached the lobby. "The real work is finished. Now we get to watch the empire fall." We walked toward the heavy revolving doors of Alpha Holdings Tower. The cold marble floor reflected the morning light. Before I could step out into the freezing Chicago air, a frantic, echoing shout tore through the immaculate lobby. "Allison, wait." I stopped and turned around slowly. Diane and Jamal mirrored my stance, forming an impenetrable human wall. David burst out of the express elevator. He was completely unrecognizable from the arrogant vice president who had shoved me into a blizzard exactly 7 days ago. His bespoke navy suit was rumpled. His silk tie was askew. The red handprint from Beverly's vicious slap still burned across his left cheek. He was hyperventilating, sprinting across the lobby, while the building security guards eyed him suspiciously. He threw himself forward, stopping just inches from my stiletto heels. His eyes were wide with pure, unfiltered terror. "The custody papers are not enough," David gasped, his chest heaving violently. I called my criminal defense attorney from the suite. He said the custody surrender does not protect me from the federal wire fraud indictment. He said the FBI will raid my apartment by noon. "Allison, you have the decrypted physical hard drives. You have the raw evidence. If you hand those physical drives to the federal prosecutors, I will get 20 years in a maximum security penitentiary. You have to withhold them." I looked down at the pathetic, trembling man who had once promised to protect me. "You want me to obstruct a federal investigation to save your life?" I asked, my voice echoing coldly in the vast lobby. "You threw your bleeding wife and 10-day-old infants into sub-zero temperatures so you could fund a yacht for a billionaire heiress. And now you want mercy." "I will do anything," David begged, tears streaming down his bruised face. "I will give you whatever you want. Please do not let them lock me away." Diane Hayes stepped forward, unzipping her pristine leather briefcase. She pulled out a fresh, heavily watermarked legal document and a heavy gold fountain pen. She placed the document flat on the black marble reception desk nearby. "You signed the custody surrender upstairs," Diane stated with lethal precision. "But that still leaves you with fundamental parental rights. It leaves a desperate avenue for you to petition the court in the future. My client requires absolute permanent eradication. This document is a voluntary, irrevocable termination of parental rights. It legally severs your biological connection to Leo and Lily entirely. It removes your name from their birth certificates. You will legally become a ghost to them forever." David stared at the heavy legal document. His hands shook so violently he could barely keep them at his sides. He knew he was standing at the edge of a cliff. "If you sign this termination right now," I said, leaning in closer so he could hear the absolute finality in my tone, "I will instruct my legal team to withhold the physical hard drives from the initial federal subpoena. I will let Jamal's whistleblower report stand on its own. It might buy you exactly enough time to negotiate a plea deal and avoid a maximum security sentence. But if you hesitate for even 1 second, I will personally drive to the FBI field office and hand-deliver the raw data that will bury you forever." David did not read a single paragraph. He snatched the gold pen from Diane's hand. He bent over the marble desk and frantically signed his name on every single line, his tears leaving dark wet spots on the heavy legal paper. He was signing away his own flesh and blood in pure terror just to save his own skin. He traded his children for a plea deal without a shred of hesitation. Diane smoothly pulled the document away, securing it in her briefcase. "The transaction is complete," Diane noted coldly. "You are legally nothing to them now." Just as the briefcase clicked shut, Jamal's encrypted smartphone vibrated intensely. He pulled it from his pocket, his eyes scanning a live, high-priority alert. He let out a low, highly satisfied whistle. "Look at the screens," Jamal commanded, pointing toward the massive digital news monitors mounted on the lobby wall. The breaking news banner flashed in bright red letters across the local broadcast. The headline read, "Federal Agents Raid Downtown Commercial Real Estate Firm." Live helicopter footage showed dozens of FBI agents wearing dark tactical gear swarming the headquarters of Beverly's company. Agents were physically carrying out massive server racks, boxes of internal financial files and computer hard drives. The camera zoomed in on the front entrance, capturing two federal marshals securing the building with heavy yellow crime scene tape. The mother and son empire was officially crumbling in real time right in front of our eyes. David stared at the television screens, his mouth hanging open in silent horror. The reality of his absolute destruction was broadcasting to millions of people across the state. My phone buzzed next. It was an automated notification from my private equity holding company. Illinois Regional Bank had just officially triggered the default clauses. Beverly's entire portfolio was formally seized. Immediately after Thomas Thorne, the billionaire investor Beverly had desperately relied upon, issued a brutal public press release. Thorne formally condemned Beverly and David, announcing an immediate aggressive civil lawsuit against them for investor fraud. He publicly humiliated David, stating his family would never associate with a desperate embezzling criminal. David lost his children, his mistress, his freedom, and his empire in a matter of mere minutes. He slid down the polished marble pillar of the lobby, collapsing into a pathetic sobbing heap on the floor. At that exact moment, the elevator doors chimed behind us. Beverly stumbled out into the lobby. She looked completely hollowed out. Her designer handbag hung limply from her arm. She saw the news broadcast playing on the monitors. She saw her corporate headquarters being dismantled by federal agents. She saw her son crying on the floor. She saw the news ticker scrolling at the bottom of the screen announcing the total liquidation of her assets. Beverly locked eyes with me. There was no anger left in her expression. There was no corporate arrogance. There was only the empty, vacant stare of a tyrant who had just watched her entire universe burn to ash. She had nothing left to leverage. Her identity was entirely erased. "You have until 5 o'clock to vacate my property, Beverly," I reminded her, my voice slicing through the heavy silence of the lobby. "Do not leave a mess." I turned and walked through the revolving doors into the crisp, freezing Chicago air. Jamal and Diane flanked me, leaving the shattered remains of my former family behind. The black Cadillac Escalade was waiting at the curb. I climbed into the heated interior, feeling the profound, undeniable warmth of absolute victory. "Take us home," I instructed the driver. The heavy SUV pulled away from the curb, leaving the skyscraper and the toxic wreckage far behind. I looked out the tinted window at the sparkling city skyline. I had defended my children. I had executed a flawless financial assassination. The war was over, and I had claimed every single piece of the board. The war was over, and I had claimed every single piece of the board. 3 months later, the brutal Chicago winter had finally melted away, giving way to a crisp, vibrant spring. But for Beverly and David, the deep freeze was entirely permanent. I sat in the back of my Cadillac Escalade as Vance navigated the familiar sweeping driveway of the Lake Forest estate. The massive iron gates, once a symbol of Beverly's untouchable status, were padlocked shut with heavy industrial chains. A massive bright yellow bank foreclosure sign was hammered ruthlessly into the perfectly manicured front lawn. The federal government and the IRS had completely dismantled her corporate holdings, but the physical house belonged entirely to my private equity firm. I had successfully foreclosed on the property 30 days after our final confrontation at Alpha Holdings Tower. I rolled down the tinted window, letting the cool spring breeze wash over my face as I surveyed the empty, lifeless mansion. The towering mahogany front door, the exact same door David had shoved me out of during a sub-zero blizzard, was now sealed with a tamper-proof legal notice. They had vacated the premises at precisely 4:59 on that fateful afternoon 3 months ago. They left with 2 suitcases of basic clothing and absolutely nothing else. The luxury vehicles, the imported artwork, and the antique furniture had all been seized to satisfy the massive, staggering debts they owed to my holding company and to Thomas Thorne. Vance parked the SUV near the fountain. "Do you want to go inside, boss?" he asked, looking at me through the rearview mirror. "No," I replied, my voice steady and completely devoid of attachment. "I just wanted to see the lock on the door. Put the property on the commercial market tomorrow morning. Sell it to the highest bidder. I never want to see this house again." We drove back to downtown Chicago, leaving the ruins of Beverly's arrogance in the rearview mirror. The aftermath of their implosion had been swift, merciless, and incredibly public. David had ultimately accepted a federal plea deal. To avoid a 20-year sentence in a maximum security penitentiary for wire fraud and pension embezzlement, he pleaded guilty and received a mandatory 7-year sentence in a federal correctional facility. He was completely bankrupt, publicly disgraced, and legally erased from his children's lives forever. Beverly avoided prison only because David took the sole blame for the direct embezzlement. But her punishment was arguably worse than a jail cell for a woman of her blinding narcissism. She was stripped of every single asset she had ever acquired. Thomas Thorne's ruthless civil litigation drained whatever hidden capital she tried to stash away. She was currently living in a cramped two-bedroom rental apartment on the far outskirts of the city, surviving entirely on a heavily garnished Social Security check. The high society friends who used to attend her lavish dinner parties now pretended they did not even know her name. Her empire was dust, and her legacy was nothing but a cautionary tale of corporate greed. The private elevator of my high-rise carried me up to the 65th floor. The doors slid open to my sprawling, sunlit penthouse. The atmosphere was a profound contrast to the cold, toxic environment of my past. The enormous floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking panoramic view of Lake Michigan sparkling under the clear blue sky. Allison, a warm, cheerful voice called out from the open-concept kitchen. Lauren, David's younger sister, walked toward me with a radiant smile. She was glowing, her pregnancy beginning to show, completely liberated from the suffocating, oppressive grip her mother had held over her entire life. Right behind her was Jamal, looking sharper and more relaxed than I had ever seen him. He wore a crisp navy suit minus the tie, projecting the effortless confidence of a man who owned his own destiny. Jamal had used the $500,000 retainer I provided to secure absolute federal immunity. He cooperated fully with the FBI and the IRS, handing over every piece of decrypted financial evidence. Once the dust settled, he opened his own independent forensic accounting firm. His reputation as a brilliant, uncorrupted auditor skyrocketed, and his new business was already securing massive corporate contracts across the state. The private neonatal nurse gently wheeled a custom double bassinet into the living room. Leo and Lily were awake, their bright eyes taking in the sunlit room. They were 3 months old, healthy, thriving, and completely surrounded by genuine love. I picked up Leo, pressing a soft kiss to his warm cheek, while Lauren gently lifted Lily, cooing at the smiling infant. I poured champagne for myself and Lauren, who held a glass of sparkling cider. Jamal raised his own crystal flute, the afternoon light catching the golden liquid. To the new firm, Jamal toasted, his deep voice carrying a profound sense of gratitude and triumph. And to the most brilliant, terrifyingly effective cybersecurity consultant in the entire country. You did not just save my career, Allison. You saved our family. Lauren nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. You showed me that we did not have to live in fear of her money anymore, Lauren added softly. You broke the cycle. My baby is going to grow up in a world where Beverly has absolutely no power. Thank you. I looked at the beautiful chosen family standing in my living room. I looked at my thriving, perfect children, who would never know the sting of conditional love or the trauma of narcissistic abuse. I had walked into a raging blizzard with nothing but the clothes on my back and a fresh surgical wound. I had been discarded, underestimated, and marked for total destruction. They thought pushing a mother and her newborn infants out into a storm would freeze her to death. They never stopped to consider that some women do not freeze. Some women adapt, calculate, and become the architects of an entirely new world. To absolute freedom, I said, clinking my glass against theirs. The crystal rang with a clear, beautiful, resonant sound. I took a sip of the crisp champagne, looking out over the boundless horizon of the city I now quietly conquered. The game was over, the board was cleared, and the future belonged entirely to us. The story of Allison teaches a profound lesson about the true meaning of resilience and family. When faced with ultimate betrayal from those who were supposed to protect her, she refused to accept the role of a powerless victim. Instead, she used her intelligence, preparation, and courage to forge her own path. The most important takeaway is that our worth is never defined by how toxic individuals treat us. Furthermore, family is not strictly limited to bloodlines or marriage certificates. True family is built on mutual respect, genuine support, and unconditional love. Values beautifully demonstrated by her chosen allies, Jamal and Lauren. Allison's journey reminds us that setting fierce boundaries is a vital act of self-love. When we refuse to tolerate mistreatment, we create the space to build a secure, peaceful life. If you have ever felt underestimated, take a moment today to recognize your own strength and set the boundaries you deserve.